we're spending a fortune on illegal migration in hotels, paid for by people who are struggling to pay their own bills and couldn't afford that kind of accommodation for themselves. We have no policing, no law and order. You can avoid the areas in Chicago and New York. Not that that's good. Listen, any crime's bad, but in London you can't avoid anywhere. You know, you cannot wear a nice watch. Your phone will get nicked wherever you are. The basic duty of government is to protect you. There's something I can't provide private police, right? That's the one thing that we cannot provide privately for ourselves. Everything else, really, every public service, you can. And we can't. And the Sadiq Khan's, he's completely failed on that. They're housing men that could be serial rapists when they're from. Not that they all are, but we have no idea of their criminal history, right? And that unknown is a huge risk. Everyone is with reform because they still believe in something.
Laila, in the last 2 years, I've had a phone stolen, I've had a bike stolen, and I've had a laptop stolen living in London. What is going wrong?
So you've got a mayor that's effectively deprioritized crime. He's cut visible policing. I mean, for instance, in my Safer Neighbourhood team, I had 10 officers 7 years ago, and I'm the councillor there. Now I have one. And when you only have one or two, they need to attend court to give evidence in anything they're a party to. And that also takes them away. So he's actually cut them out. He's also cutting, just so you know, police on the royal parks from November because apparently there's no money. And he politicised stop and search. So stop and search has been halved. And prop and search is really the only way to stop people from carrying knives. I mean, as a criminal prosecutor, I saw when criminals carrying knives know that the police are running after them, they discard them because then you can't prove that it was theirs unless you can put fingerprints, unless you can connect fingerprints. And they'd hide them in bushes and playgrounds. And stop and search prevents a knife being used.
Do you think that we're measuring crime in the wrong way in the city? Are we not actually even scratching the surface of how serious this really is, given that a lot of people don't bother reporting this stuff anymore?
I think a lot of people, I mean, especially what I would say non-violent crimes are not reported. Also, police recorded data, which is the data that we base our campaign on. Police recorded data estimates that, over 500,000 rapes are not reported. Some hundreds of thousands of stabbings are not reported because they're between youths and they don't report it. I mean, I know, for instance, on my high street, I've got a Holland & Barrett and Sainsbury's, and they don't report it. Because it's all the time. So I went into Holland & Barrett, a guy walked in, took some vitamins and left, and I told them, are you not going to report it? They're like, they're not, why should we?
Yeah, I mean, I can attest to that personally, because when my phone was stolen over a year ago, I thought, well, that's it, it's gone. And when I finally rang the police, 24 hours later, they said, why didn't you at the time? And I thought, yeah, well, what are they going to do about it? You even have the tracking data for this stuff. I know you talk about this all day because it was so frustrating.
It's so frustrating.
Yeah, your laptops, whatever, tech. You have the tracking data for these devices. You tell them, to within a meter where this phone is, and the police can't. They say they can't do anything. I mean, would you change that? The policy towards that? Do you think the police should have more power because they say they don't have this statutory power to enter properties and go after these criminals more directly?
So we'll look at there's going to be a zero tolerance approach should reform get in government. And we'll look at any legislation that prevents that.
Right.
But right now, the police doesn't really need more powers. They need more resources, right? So my husband also had his laptop stolen. He tracked it. And the police said, I'm sorry, there's no one to send to you. Right? So resources are an issue. For instance, when I was a criminal prosecutor. So for instance, if someone does steal, let's say £50 worth of steak, even if they are prosecuted, they get nothing, right? And they're released the next day to go and steal again from that same high street. And with such weak punishment or sentencing, the only power we have is something called the CBO, which is a criminal behavior order, which can ban them from the area. They're amazing tools, right? The only police force in the country that uses them really well is the City of London. You commit one crime and you're banned from the area. And
how are they enforcing that?
So if you're seen in the area, it becomes a criminal offence that could be imprisonable. It becomes a more serious criminal offence.
I see.
Right? And I know that the Met don't have enough resources to it. So the City of London Police and the Met are different. And they don't have enough resources because you have to file an application, gather evidence and attend court. Whereas the City Police have dedicated someone to do that. And that is a real failure because criminals can go repeat, and it's so corrosive to the community and to shops. And I see the same offender, the same thieves, the same antisocial behaviour happening from the same people in my area, and there's nothing you can do because the police are not issuing these CBOs, and they're not imprisonable offences, right? So you can't put them in prison, but you can have other punitive sentencing. And the issue is, so we have football banning orders, right? So if you commit one offence, your first offence, no matter how minor it is. I mean, I had a guy in court who literally had a tiny amount of drugs, horrific, and he should be prosecuted for it. But you get a 3-year banning order from any football match, right? And you have to inform the police if you're travelling to an away game. That is very, very extensive, right? Yeah. So the will is there to protect football matches. And I don't know if you saw, but Labour want to bring that same kind of banning order to pubs and concerts.
Yeah.
But I want to see that kind of will to protect the normal public, to protect high streets. I want to see CBOs issued after just one single crime. I think that would be a huge deterrent.
And it
wouldn't take more prison space.
Right. Why is this getting worse though? I mean, just last week, more anecdotal evidence from me, but I think it's interesting that in my area where I live in London last week, 2 kids, 16, 17, one of them had a zombie knife out on the street where I live and stabbed the other kid on that street. And, I've lived there 4 or 5 years now.
Wow.
I think it's getting worse in the last couple of years. What do you think is the root cause of that?
Well,
not because there's no prevention, but why are people doing this in the first place?
So if you really want to go to the root cause, for instance, when I was growing up, I grew up in quite a deprived part of London.
Yeah.
I used to play basketball every Sunday, right? And I'd train every day, all day. And I was obsessed with basketball. I was obsessed with my team. I didn't want to let my coach down. And that prevented me and my mates doing smoking, doing drugs, doing any kind of crime. And that kind of youth activity has effectively been shut down in London. So the youth have nowhere to go, right? And the devil kind of makes work for idle hands. So that if you want to really take the root cause of that, that could be attributed to it. And I'd like to see more youth provisions privately or publicly, but I don't see that. And I've got kids and I don't have any, it's expensive, it's hard to find, you got to travel, but in inner London, you don't see it. And again, there is no police, so there's no deterrence. So if someone with a knife is walking down a high street and sees the police, right, and that police is consistently there, they're just not going to do it anymore. And if that police officer is consistently there and dedicated to the area, then the person carrying a knife will be like, oh my God, it's PC so-and-so, I'm not going to go there anymore. So, and stop and search, as I said. So I think for me, every year that he's been in power, I feel it gets worse. But he's very tough on motorists, right? So if you don't pay your ULEZ, they'll come after you, right? So they don't mess around with that one. And he had the will to enforce that very well. So I don't know why there isn't the will to keep us safe.
Do you think we need to go down the path of facial recognition or ID cards? What's your position on that as a safety measure?
No, I don't think we should have ID cards at all. Yep. I don't want more government. I want less government. And I don't think the government should have more data on me in any way. And I think the only reason why I want to bring ID is to deal with illegal migration. I don't see why I should be disadvantaged for that. No way. In terms of facial recognition, I do believe that it could be used, perhaps, I haven't looked into it intermittently, in hotspots, right? So actually, it was used in this year's Notting Hill Carnival, and it reduced the amount of crime massively. So what they did is they have facial recognition kind of in the approaching area to the carnival, and they could arrest people before they've even entered the carnival or the area. And that really did help. I think something like 700 weapons were seized as a result before they even entered. Sadly, when you don't have police, you have to employ measures like that some people could see as draconian. But when I board a plane in America, actually, it's facial recognition now. It could be under review. I don't think it should be a blanket thing, but I think in hotspots where you have under-resourced police officers, I think it could be a handy tool.
Well, very quickly, you just mentioned Notting Hill Carnival. What's your take on the carnival itself? Should it continue? I think Nigel Farage talked about maybe moving it to Hyde Park or something like that. Do you think it should be banned or moved in any way?
I think there needs to be a discussion about where it is. I live in the footprint,
right?
And I have residents that live in the footprint. And I grew up on the north side of Ladbroke Grove, so I was going there every year when I was young. I'd never go there now. I wouldn't send my children there now. So it's not what it was before. For me, one death is too many. So the woman last year who was stabbed for nothing. And I think there needs to be a reevaluation. I mean, it was much better this year with the facial recognition. So perhaps,
yeah.
I think it may have outgrown it, and it drains a lot of police resources. And it really, I think it takes a lot of commercial value from the area. So all the shops board up for 2-3 days. I know residents leave. For instance, I don't allow my boys especially to kind of go out during then in the streets because I worry that something's going to kick off. And it is a disadvantage. So perhaps a more enclosed area would be better.
I want to talk about your political journey specifically. So on a broader point, why politics in the first place? You're a councillor. How did that happen? Why did you come into politics in the first place?
So I've always been interested in politics. So my mum had me quite late. All my siblings were off married or at college, and it was just me and my mum and my dad. And my parents aren't extremely political. My mum was especially. So they moved here in the 60s, when Egypt became communist, and their lives improved under a conservative government, you know. And my mum would watch the news avidly, and we'd discuss it. I mean, Arthur Scargill was the baddie when I was growing up in my bedtime stories. So I've always been political. Yeah. And I've always kind of been drawn to public service. So I left a job in the city to join the Crown Prosecution. It's something, you know what it is? It controls every aspect of our lives. Right. And also at the Crown Prosecution, when I first worked there, I noticed that there were so many things that needed change, and you can't really affect change when you're part of the system. And I naively thought that, you know, I'd try and get in government and I could change things. But I do realize that you need a party that is not career politicians, right? Because so everyone in Reform, I find, has something else to fall back on. Right. So they're not just doing everything to save their vote or to save their position because they have nothing else, which is what you see mainly in the other parties.
Yes, you were a Conservative.
I was a Conservative for a very long time. And I was a Conservative because I hark back to Margaret Thatcher's days, right? Radical reform, lower tax, high growth, home ownership. You know, I speak to so many 30 and 40-year-olds who'll never own their home and have no chance of owning their home. And we're going to have a state that can't provide for them. And then what? And that's a real problem because we're the party of home ownership. But I know that NIMBYism is rife in Conservative constituencies. And that's a problem. There has to be a mature discussion about house building.
Yeah, when did you come to the decision to jump over? How long? That must have weighed on you for quite some time.
So I've been like talking behind, you know, in the back. It's almost like being married to someone that you really don't like anymore.
Right, okay.
Right? You really don't like, but you've been married for such a long time.
Yeah.
And you're not quite ready to get divorced.
Right.
Right. So I'd been at that stage for about a year or two.
Okay. So you're having sort of counselling.
Yeah. I speak to my husband and he'd be like, why the hell are you with them still? And then, as I said, I'd knock on doors and I would dread knocking on doors. And I love campaigning normally. I would dread it because they'd be like, you know, and it would be our voters who would be the most angry, right. You know, and they'd name everything that was wrong with it. You know, we've had the highest tax burden since World War II. I can't see an NHS doctor. I met a woman who was an NHS nurse and she's got real hearing issues and her husband had a stroke. She says, I'm waiting a year for hearing aids. You know, she's worked and paid into the system her whole life. We're spending a fortune on illegal migration in hotels, paid for by people who are struggling to pay their own bills and couldn't afford that kind of accommodation for themselves. We have no policing, no law and order. And the net zero madness, you know, my bills kept going up. And for what? You know, when China and India are ramping up coal production and outproducing us massively manufacturally. Yeah. All these things, I couldn't defend it anymore. And at the doorstep, I kind of end up having a really long conversation about how terrible the Tories were. And in the end, I'm like, well, you know, there's no choice really.
And meanwhile, Reform are growing, and are they talking to you?
Yeah, so
quietly?
I spoke to them. Yeah. I'd met them. I'd met a few of the key players. I'd met Nigel, and everything they said, I was like, it's so natural what they say. Right. You know, for me, it's not about left or right. It's about common sense. It's about safety or unsafety. It's about high tax or not high tax, and all these things. I was like, yeah, you know, I totally agree with you. And everyone said, oh, they don't have any experience. And I said, well, the Tories and Labour have a lot of experience and they've ruined it. Right. And they have experience in other things.
Yeah.
And that's what really attracted me to them.
Yeah.
And the one thing that really kicked it off was when the grooming gangs, the rape gangs came back into the conversation.
Right. Yeah.
And I was
which was January, February this year, right?
And I was discussing it with my husband, and I'm like, you know what? The Tories keep calling for an investigation, but they sat on it. This isn't new information. They didn't do anything. They didn't call a wide investigation. They didn't arrest everyone involved, from councillor to police to MP. And so they're also complicit. And I didn't want to be part of any party that had anything to do with it.
Do you think, will there be more defections? Do you see this growing when you're having these conversations?
I've already been contacted by a few.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
How many?
A few.
A few?
A few. I mean, not,
Yeah.
Not 10. About 10. I mean...
Councillors, I mean, or...
Councillors, yeah.
Yeah.
And just people in general.
Right.
But I think... So I've been contacted by a lot of women, actually, who've told me, Laila, I voted Reform last time, and I'd love to join. And seeing you kind of normalised it, but I don't...
Yeah.
I'm scared of the social repercussions.
Yeah. So because when you defected, what was that like? Your Conservative colleagues, what was the
they don't
reaction?
speak to me. They barely look at me.
Still?
Oh my God. So when I
Really?
attended the first council, even though I've worked with them for years, they didn't make any eye contact with me. It was really funny.
Yeah.
And I'd look at them and stare at them just to kind of nerve them, and they'd look away. And they don't speak to me, no. And they tried to smear me, saying, that I was deselected when I wasn't, by the way. I was doing very well in my seat, and I was the one that was going to be selected. It was nothing personal. It was purely ideological. It was. They no longer represent my values. How do I say it? I think being a politician's a bit like, or when you campaign, it's like being a traveling salesman, right? So you have to believe in what you're telling people, or at least do it with conviction.
Yeah. How does Reform campaign in a city like London? Right. You may. I'm sure on the outskirts, out just towards the edges of the M25, it's a little bit easier. But certainly in the inner city. How are you going to make any headway there?
So we've already got incredible branches set up, actually.
Right.
Who are very well attended, a lot of members, a full slate of officer teams. And I think, London's a big puzzle, right? So we'll take it bit by bit. And obviously some areas will cover less and some areas will cover more. Admittedly, the tower blocks are harder, right? Because you can't get in. But every ward will cover itself.
Yeah.
And I think we're doing well because it's really a different situation. Everyone is with Reform because they still believe in something. They're not just with it because, I've always been a Tory, even though everyone I speak to who's still a Tory is like, I agree with what you say, but, and that's why they're still there.
Yeah. So just the history of it, the sort of familial attraction to it,
yeah,
rather than necessarily
the ideas. And they're
not
quite sure what Reform's about, or they're not. They're still a bit, but. So
that's the work you still need to do going forward, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
But when I speak to people from Reform, there's just an excitement. There's a thrill, and that's really amazing.
Yeah. So what does a good result in London look like for Reform? Realistically, obviously, you'll have an ambitious result, a realistic one, and a lower end. What's the game plan there? What are you going to? What will you be happy with?
So I think we'll be happy with winning a few councils.
Yep.
About 2 to 3, 4. I think that's possible. And we'll be happy with, getting a foot into the strong Conservative or Labour ones. I mean, for instance, I met a councillor from Wales who won his ward that was 85% Labour and has never been anything else.
Yeah.
And he won it. And as I said, I don't think it's about right or left anymore. I think everyone recognises, whether you're Labour or Conservative, everyone recognises Khan's failures, right? And I do think that the May elections in some areas will be a referendum on Khan, right? And everyone voting should understand that if you vote for a Labour councillor that's propping him up, that hasn't said anything about his failings, then you're effectively propping him up.
Yeah. I saw your video confronting the mayor a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
So that was fun. Obviously, didn't have much interest in talking to you. But do you have, beyond that, have you had much?
Zero.
No contact with him, even during your Conservative days?
No.
He's always kept his distance.
Yeah, he doesn't really. That was meant to be a walkabout.
Yeah.
Walkabout where you speak to the public, but he had about 20 security guards around him.
Yeah.
I've not seen that. I don't think even the Prime Minister does that. So no, I've never had any dealings with him. Yeah. I don't think he deals with little people like me.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because is he going to stand for a third term? What's going to happen in 2028? Do you think he'll run again in 28, or do you think Labour are going to have to find someone new? Is he spent?
I don't think he thinks he's spent. No, I definitely don't. I think he's that kind of arrogant person who never thinks he's spent. It's a self-righteousness.
On the reform side, though, I do have to ask you: do you think? I'll ask it more broadly, and then we'll narrow it down a bit. What is the sort of person who needs to fill the reform candidacy? What are you looking for in the candidate for reform candidate for London Mayor?
So I think two things. One is a Londoner through and through, right? And someone that can win, right? So it has to be someone that can beat Khan.
Someone that can win.
And I think now's the time.
Right. What does that mean? I mean, we touched a little bit on it in terms of how you campaign in the inner cities and so on. Someone that can win, what does that mean? Because the Tories only won with Boris, and he was, we talk about Boris for a very long time, but he was a very unique candidate. So what is the sort of alchemy that candidate needs?
I mean, that's a good question, right? And that's something for the selections. What makes a good candidate? I guess someone that's appealing to the public, someone that the public will listen to. And someone that's convincing and compelling. I think compelling is key because I've never bumped into someone, and I've spoken to so many Londoners who are like, yeah, I love Khan, I'm going to vote for him.
Right.
Have you?
No, I can't say I have.
Exactly, right? So you're wondering, how the hell does he get in?
Yeah.
So I think someone that's compelling and someone that can debate him well,
And are you thinking, you know what question I'm going to ask? Are you thinking of doing that yourself?
If I was asked to do it, it'd be an honor, of course. It's, I'm born and raised here, as I said, and I'm still living here. My kids are raised here. They're born here. I work here. My whole life is here, and I love London. I love it.
Yeah.
And seeing it like this is very, very upsetting. I was in New York staying with a friend, and her son, who was 18, he's like, "Oh my God, I've seen on TikTok like, what the hell's going on in London?"
Yeah.
That's the. And I was asking him, I'm like, so if you walk, they live in the Upper East Side, which is quite a nice area. I'm like, so if you walk here or in the park, do you feel danger? He goes, no, only if I go to the rough parts. And in Chicago, it was the same. I was in an Uber driver, and I told him, do you see young guys walking around with balaclavas in groups? And he goes, oh my God, no, that's terrifying. And so the point is that you can avoid the areas in Chicago and New York. Not that that's good. Listen, any crime's bad, but in London, you can't avoid anywhere. You cannot wear a nice watch. Your phone will get nicked wherever you are. And that's the history of London. That's the story of London now.
Yeah. So if the party leadership approaches you and says, Laila, maybe give this a go, you think you'd throw your hat in to be the candidate?
Of course. It would be an honor.
Yeah.
It would be an honor to represent my city.
Yeah.
And yeah, of course.
And when you see the likes of, I think it's the news agents like Lewis Goodall and James O'Brien, figures on the left.
Fraser Nelson, yeah.
Well, when they say, he might disagree with that characterization, but the point I'm making is, generally they say that the crime stats don't reflect the reality, and think it's not as bad as the right wing media, in their words, suggests. I think Lewis Goodall's particularly focusing on London and said this is effectively, not quoting him verbatim, but it's nowhere near as serious as the media and the political class, the right wing political class, say. What do you say to that?
I completely disagree. I live in a decent part of London. My son's been mugged at knife point. My kids have been, and I called the police. And at another point, they were targeted multiple times by the same muggers right by our house. He was mugged. So in Sainsbury's, someone went up to him, said, I've got a knife in my pocket, kind of showed it to him, and said, give me your phone, and then said, walk with me for 10 minutes until it clears. Right? My son is 14. He thought he was going to be kidnapped and killed in that car. This is in a packed high street. And then my two other kids were also targeted. And I had to do all the chasing myself. So I called the police. I chased them down to McDonald's. And they're like, we're sorry, we don't have enough resources to send you. I'm like, they've been mugged under our house, which is really quite dangerous. And they said no. So through the next weeks, I had to chase the muggers. I followed them to the local estates. I took pictures of their shoes because they wear balaclavas.
Yeah.
And I went to all the shops that sell illicit phones. And I said, listen, if you buy these, you're an accomplice. I got called Vigilante Mom by the press. Yeah. But I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I don't want to be doing that. I don't want to risk my life. But what else are you supposed to do? And it's, that the basic duty of government is to protect you. There's something, I can't provide private police, right? That's the one thing that we cannot provide privately for ourselves. Everything else, really, every public service, you can. And we can't. And Sadiq Khan's, he's completely failed on that.
Yeah. That story's unbelievable.
Unbelievable. But it's not unique.
No.
It's across, I hear that across London. Like you say, so for me, when they say that, the media, for me, one crime, right, is the crime is due to Sadiq's policy. That's what the point, right? It is due to his lack of, how can they say it's not bad? We've had 81,000 thefts, I think, in the past year of phones, and that's the ones that are reported. And I don't know if you saw, but an American insurance company who does claims for all the phones said we are the highest by far in all of Europe. London, not England.
Yeah.
And knife crime, by the way, is up 68% in the past decade and accounts for more than half of knife crimes, despite London only accounting for 15% of England's population.
Yeah.
So I don't know, it's easy for them to say that in their little area. And also kids are petrified. Teenagers are really scared of going out.
What do you tell your kids?
So I tell my children to run if they see anything. If they see a kid with balaclava or something, they're scared. I never had that growing up. I really didn't. I used to play basketball in really quite rough parts of London. I take the tube. I was 13. Never was that worry
Yeah.
And I worry more about my boys than I do about my girls, actually, in London.
Why is that? That's interesting.
So I spoke to a few superintendents and police officers, and they agreed with me, because number one, so many of the boys carry knives, right? Or weapons.
Okay, yeah.
Right, and anything kicks a boy off. Teenage boys are impulsive, to be polite.
Yeah.
And anything can kick it off.
Yeah.
What the hell are you looking at? And even though I tell my boys not to fight, I know them, they're just boys. They'll be like, what? Or something. You just never know. And I worry about that. And my girls, yes, of course, sexual assault is a huge issue. But if they're careful and in a group and they don't walk alone at night, there is a way to prevent it.
Yeah.
I think. But with a boy, you can't wrap him in cotton wool and drive him everywhere.
Yeah.
They have to be street smart as well.
Yeah. And how do they feel about it? Are they still
No,
scared?
they are really scared.
Yeah.
The boys more.
Really?
Yeah. No, definitely. And all their friends are, by the way. They're not, and the parents are. They're not. I've had people who lived in Bayswater area who've moved out because there's a station called Royal Oak. Their son, who was 17, would be consistently get mugged as he's coming out. So they're like, we're just going to move.
Yeah. You're seeing that a lot. I'm seeing that people just moving out.
People just moving out. And that was never the case. People were moving into London before when they had the first opportunity because it was a fantastic city to live in. So I do find it a bit insulting, actually, when they say that.
Yeah. The left-wing media.
Yeah, I think it's insulting to victims.
Right? Okay.
And it's not the truth.
Yeah. I do want to end on a slightly more optimistic note.
Of course.
So I will ask, what are you bullish about with Britain's future? What do you think, try and phrase this properly, what are you most optimistic about the next 5 years in Britain? What's going well? What's going to go well?
So I think we'll keep rising in the polls, and I think that's going to go well because, as you've seen, we are dictating the narrative, the political narrative. So we will come up with amazing policies that will maybe force the government to make a U-turn or embrace them, as you've seen. I think Sama said he'd actually negotiate with the Taliban.
He did, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, with Afghanistan.
So, shocking that he said that after all the criticism they said. And so even though I think, whatever it takes to protect the country is what needs to be done. And I think, so for me, technology is great, but sadly, we're the least automated country in the G7. We've relied on cheap foreign labor for too much, and we haven't invested in skills and labor. So I wish we could see more of that, embrace AI technology. But the problem with AI, it takes up so much energy. And I don't think we have the energy capabilities to be an AI superpower, which we could because we have the best universities, some of the best universities in the world. And it's hard to be optimistic with this government. And I don't say that because I'm reform. I say that as a person. They might tax my home, right? Taxes are going to go up. They said they're going to end hotel illegal migrants by 2029.
Yeah.
In the meantime, they're housing men that could be serial rapists when they're from. Not that they all are, but we have no idea of their criminal history, right? And that unknown is a huge risk. And they should take it into account when placing them, but they don't. So if anyone commits a sexual offence here, they go on the sexual offenders register. And that's normal. But these guys, we have no idea. You and I need a passport to come into the country. They need nothing. So it's hard to be optimistic when my taxes are going up and I know that part of it is paying for that, right? And my home that you always think is my castle and is kind of protected, it's not. I feel that they're coming after anything they can. Yep. So you're always in fear that what's going to happen. Also, they've given away so many things that are unnecessary. So this 1 in, 1 out deal, you know, over 3,000 have come in since then. Is France really going to take 3,000 back? I just feel they say things just for headlines, but it's does nothing. So I don't know. Are you optimistic?
Oh, it's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. I do think we are in trouble. I think on the media side it's interesting what we're doing here. And I just had Jacob Rees-Mogg. We just chatted to him, and viewers will be able to watch that soon as well. And we were just talking about the sort of democratization of the media and it becoming more pluralistic, more people getting involved. I think that's a good thing.
Great.
Wouldn't be back here if I didn't think that was something worth investing in. But broadly speaking, a lot of people I talk to, I know people who are leaving the country, like we just mentioned. Many. So I don't know. I think it's worth sticking around and trying to make good of it, but I do think it's tricky.
I think it's really tricky. What you say about the independent media, I mean, I read the usual newspapers just for a bit of facts, but I really get all my information from social media.
Right.
And that's why I think politics has also changed, because in the olden days you only had the 4 channels telling us what to do and you don't know who dictated that. Now it is everyone has access to different information, and that's very exciting.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I think that's the way things are going. That's why we're here today. That's why we're chatting in front of these cameras. So that's what I'm excited about. But I think later we'll leave it there. Maybe we'll have for more conversations on in the future in terms of reform and see how things go. But thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
Cheers.